I don't want to be. I insist. You told me I wouldn't be on the screen with him.
Chris. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the WTF show. Noticing I'm censoring my words this week. I would like to start by welcoming everybody who's here and watching. Thank you all for being here. I know you're hoping that this will be a dumpster fire, but I can assure you we won't be on here. But I'd like my mods just to be wary in the chat. Be all nice to each other, everyone in the chat. But if anyone in the chat starts using personal attacks on anybody else, you get a timeout straight away. There is no questions asked. Personal attacks are not a thing that's going to happen here at all. Ideas can be challenged. Don't attack people. Okay.
So I love that you use the term timeout because it reminds me of when my kids muck up.
Yeah, they're going in the
you want a timeout? Do you want a timeout?
You've been bad.
So as the co-host, I will boot somebody. I won't give you a timeout. I will boot you.
There you go.
well, I don't do that to my kids, but I do give them a timeout. So
you know, as a matter of fact, I will boot you so far. Atheist Pastor will see you fly over their house. That's how far I will boot you.
That can't happen.
All the way over the imaginary place.
Well, I'm on the West Coast, so if I point that way, you know, Australia.
Pacific Ocean. It's tiny.
All right. Introducing our panel tonight, we have the lovely SJ Thompson. Hey, SJ. Thank you for coming on.
Hi there. No, thank you for having me.
Yeah. No, it's brilliant to have you here. The ever controversial and incredibly intelligent Steve McRae. Hi, Steve. So good to have you on.
Hi.
It's been a long time since you've been on my channel.
It's been a day, yeah.
Yeah, okay, a year.
Yeah.
If not more.
One day unto God, whatever that is, a year, 7 years, I don't know.
Yeah, one day for God, yeah, whatever.
We've
got
years.
my down under friend, Chris, the Atheist Pastor. Hi, Chris.
Hey, how are we all?
And everybody's young favorite pagan, SamChaos. Hi, Sam.
Oh, hello there.
And as always, my lovely partner in both life and in YouTube, Godless Sewing. Hey, Will.
How's everybody doing? I'm Godless Sewing. So, I think let's get straight to the topic. That's why we're all here, right?
Yeah.
I believe so.
We're going to
talk about hair care tips. I'm cool with that as well.
Oh, remember, this is your hair. This is your hair on atheism. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
So, what are
I'm not a real atheist though.
Oh, you'll get there. You'll get there.
Yeah, but you're the lightweight Russell Crowe, aren't you?
Dopey Russell Crowe.
Oh, Dopey Russell Crowe. That's right.
Dopey Russell Crowe.
You know, these days you look more like Russell Crowe than Russell Crowe looks like himself. So.
Yeah. Oh,
I know this is
he's getting older, he's getting a little puffier. I'm from LA, so we judge movie stars. Sorry.
Well, you can only see me from here down, so you don't know how puffy I am.
All right, we
Okay.
started by talking
fair.
over each other. Let's. What were you going to say, SJ?
I was just going to say, I've been sitting here trying to figure out who Atheist Pastor looks like, and they just nailed it.
Yeah.
I feel more like Ricky Gervais, but that's just me.
Oh, no, Russell Crowe's much better than
I'll take either and their bank balances.
I don't know. Australians all look alike to me. I don't know.
Oh! Inspired by Steve earlier in the show.
Controversy, yeah.
This is why I don't want to be on the screen with Steve.
You know.
Let's get it out early.
So, I think given that we've got such a controversial word as deify in the title, we're probably best starting off by saying what we mean when we say that word.
Sam, please start with your
please start,
definition
Sam.
So my kind of working definition of deification is either treating something as would be treated a god in mainstream religion, or treating something as aspects of a god would be in mainstream religion. So, for example, taking a text as inerrant or what have you is I would consider deification, though I understand other people might say it would be strictly treating them exactly like a deity. Yeah. So that's my definition.
Do you have a definition, Steve? I'm sure you do.
Well, I don't know about taking the text itself and making it into, raising that text to a level of
But the person who
When
wrote the text.
the person
The
who wrote,
person who wrote it.
yeah, I mean, I think when we're talking about a deity concept, when first of all, people have to understand when you get into these types of discussions, we all come in with some kind of idea of what people mean by a god. People say, "Oh, what do you mean by a god?" I think if you're having any of these types of discussions, and you have to ask, "What do you mean by God?" I think it bogs down the entire conversation. So when we talk about deification, we're talking about, I think, as Sam pointed out, that we're talking about a being that exists either necessarily by metaphysical necessity, that is an explanation for why things are the way they are. That's really what the theist is positing. What they want to posit for that, whether it be a Christian type God or some other, even a pagan type of deity that can prescriptively change the laws of the universe, that's the explanation for something, right? I mean, why would there's a deity behind it that caused this to be the ultimate explanation? That's the way the theist is generally looking at it. So I hear deification, that's what I'm thinking.
Before we rebut, let's let everybody say that. And then Sam, you can go right ahead.
I don't want to get bogged down in a definition conversation. I guess we're all defining what we mean.
Yes.
So that's probably going to help get us to the core of what it is. I'm going to go for a real simple one. I've got the Merriam-Webster dictionary open. To make a god of, or to take as an object of worship, or to glorify as supreme worth. That's what I'm going off. I'm not going to get in. I'm not a philosopher. I'm not going to pretend to get into philosophical discussions over that.
Yeah. SJ.
Absolutely.
And so I'll say it's elevating something or someone to godlike status. And so I do think that we see some of that in the atheist community with some of the heroes of atheism, if you want to call them those.
Yeah, I think that's
Very
exactly
much so.
the right terminology to use, SJ. I would go with you, elevating somebody to the point where, I guess you could say they're not being looked at like a god, but they're almost being accepted as being unquestionable. These people are unassailable. Almost to the point that in some fanatical way, some of these people can't do anything wrong. I mean, a good example of that at the moment, although the community as a whole have probably torn him down a peg or two, would be Sam Harris, who was lifted to that position until more recent events came to light about him. And but even as they came to light, there were a lot of people who were basically denying that he could have done anything wrong. I'm not saying he has. He hasn't been charged with anything yet, and or whatever. I mean, I don't think it's fair to. I don't think it's fair to assassinate people in the press. I've never liked that.
You're using it in a typical fashion. Just means some of you could do no wrong in your eyes. You hero worship.
So there is definitely an element of hero worship, and that perhaps saying they're deified is the wrong thing. But that level of hero worship, where almost these people can't do something wrong, is definitely something that happens within the atheist community.
Agreed.
I think what's important though is, and I'm going to take a different position to the one that a lot of people thought, because I have spoken out a lot on the cult of atheism and some of that. Atheism is no different to any other group of people.
Absolutely.
Any group of people you get, you are going to have people who there's hierarchical structure. We're a social species. You're always going to have some kind of hierarchical structure. You're also going to have people who come into the atheist community who haven't got a foundation in certain areas. So they'll find people, they'll watch those people, and I guess in a way they begin to trust those people as an authority on something. Now, it's no different to if I walk into a university lecture hall and there's a professor lecturing on any given topic. They've got some level of authority, even if I might disagree with what they're saying, or if I'm speaking and people might disagree with what I'm saying, but there is some level of authority that's given. What I think does happen is we get a little bit of the cult of celebrity. When you're watching, say, and I don't want to use anyone as an example to say that they've done the wrong thing, but when you've got I guess people who are regularly putting out content and people are gravitating towards that content and watching it, there's actually a familiarity that comes, and it's almost like even though there's never been any contact with that person, they all of a sudden they see them as a friend. They're part of their tribe. They're sticking up for someone in their tribe. And a great example to use is I'm going to use the example of sport. Now, say you're watching your team play another team, and there's a contentious decision that could go either way. None of us ever look at it objectively and go, "Oh no, I don't think that's a penalty for my team. It probably should go the other team." We'll stand there and go, "No, what are they doing? Look at that! It's the referee or the umpire. They've got it wrong." And it's that tribal instinct that we've had for, I'm going to say, 300,000 years plus. 300,000 years as Homo sapiens, and then the rest that we've evolved with over time. So I think we've got to be careful not to paint the atheist community as this horrible thing where everyone sort of gravitates towards these few cult figures. I think there are some people in the atheist community who do damage, but as a whole, the atheist community is absolutely no different to any other community. You look at any, you're going to find the same thing.
But I also think it's good to point out, every once in a while, to remind yourself why you're here. Even if someone is SJ, I like the fact that we could bring SJ here and have her, how she feels and see her side. Because sometimes when you watch certain content, it's nothing but memes and anger. And it's coming from an, as an outsider atheist, someone who just within the past 3 years has come into the community, one of the biggest turnoffs is I'll see people obsess over another human being. And that's one of the reasons I stepped away from religion, was because I saw obsession over I won't even say what I considered God. I considered them obsession over a pastor, over a preacher, over someone who worked in the church, over the politics of the church. So it was shocking to me as a newer atheist to see the exact same thing in the atheist community. But like you just said, we're human beings.
Can I add to that?
You find that in every community.
I want to add a little bit to that, just from a Christian perspective.
Yes, please. I was going to ask religious opinion on from looking out and in. So.
Yeah, I know I'm the only one here who's got the Christian perspective.
You're the only Christian here, but you're not the only religious person here. So.
Okay, so what I'm thinking here, this is that's true. You've got that's a good point. So you've got I forgot that. Yes, Sam. So one of the things that I noticed is there is a common hero, and there's also sometimes a common enemy. And I noticed that sometimes I'm the common enemy, or other Christians that people just might kind of all come flying in at on Twitter and in other places. But the common hero, and I think Steve would probably agree to this, is one of them is I think Matt Dillahunty, because no matter what Matt does in his debates, sometimes he does better than other times, but no matter what he does, he's got some people who would be behind him. He could say the most ridiculous things, and he's got these people who are just following him to kind of worship him. And so that's what I would say.
Oh,
and also as an atheist, I've had Christians quote Matt Dillahunty to me, trying to use that as an argument. And I have to tell them, like, he's not my pope. That's my line, But
what you got to remember though with Matt Dillahunty, and I disagree with a lot of what he does. Matt Dillahunty and the atheist experience, I guess their audience is the angry atheist, the person who's just come out of religion. They're hurt. They're looking to fight back. They're wanting to get into arguments with people from whatever religion they come from. It is.
Oh, there is
look, and that's their audience. So what you'll find is, especially people who are coming out of religion, and I think, like we were saying before, where people will have almost like a hero worship of a pastor. I mean, look, I remember I used to lead worship at church, and I can tell you that put me in a very high position in the hierarchical structure at church that at times was uncomfortable, but it's the reality of being within a group of people. With Matt, I think a lot of people who are quoting Matt, who are blindly defending Matt, are people who are basically just replacing one with another. They're people who are early in their journey, and I think we've got to be careful. I think that Matt certainly has an arrogance about him. I think that's part of his appeal. I know when I first came into the atheist community, I loved watching his stuff. I'm like, yeah, come on, show it to those Christians before comments sort of hit me. And I was like, well, hang on. If I was a Christian, or when I was a Christian, if someone had have come at me like this, I would have ignored them. And it was that light bulb moment. So I think we've got to be careful once again not to attack Matt, because another thing.
So
I'm not trying to.
Really quickly, I'll just finish my point really quickly. When you've got a lot of people who are constantly patting you on the back, telling you how wonderful you are and how right you are, that does inflate the ego, and that can change your mindset as well. Anyone who's been in that position will experience that.
So I'd like to suggest that deification is not necessarily the fault of the person being deified. For example, I'll pick on Aaron Ra. Lovely guy, had conversations with him. He doesn't have a massive ego at all in conversation with him. But I get a lot of, especially new atheists, and by new I mean just coming to atheism, angry atheists, will quote Aaron to me, and then if I correct them on their definition of God to the one I'm using, they'll tell me I'm wrong because Aaron is correct by default. And I think because we have a slightly differing definition of deification there, I would call that activity deification, and I would say that it's not the atheist community, it's just a vocal minority within the atheist community, and that demographic shifts as people grow out of it.
So I think the question is kind of shifting. So are we moving it towards the angry atheist phase, or is it atheist as a whole, or is it,
I'm of the opinion that it's largely the angry atheist, but not completely, and it's a minority within the atheist community, such that I would agree with Chris that it isn't an atheist community thing. It's just within the atheist community, this is a thing.
And I think the angry atheist is almost a rite of passage to some extent. There is certainly an element.
I've never passed through it, but I think it's more entrenched than that, though. I think that there are, for example, Aaron and Matt, and not by any means exclusive to anybody else, there's a whole group of people that I can name. But I think a lot of them, they can say anything. They can say 1 + 1 = 3, and they're going to have people believe it. I mean, there are objective facts that they have been wrong about, and they have no compunction to try to correct. And as Sam rightly pointed out, as they said, that these angry atheists will quote Matt and Aaron, and even if they, like, for example, they have been factually wrong about logic, Aaron especially, factually wrong about what they have said about logic. And yet there'll be people going, well, Steve, you're just wrong on this because Aaron has said so. And yet when you ask them, okay, well, if this is objective, I happen to like math, right, a little bit. I happen to like basic logic. If this is the case, well, Aaron is correct on logic. All you have to do is show us that the case, right? It's objective. It's logic. And they never once, not once, in the history that I've been on YouTube, has anybody ever done that properly?
So, Ashley, I have a question for you. On the flip side, does it make you angry when people misquote the Bible and misuse it in what you would see as misuse?
That drives me crazy, to be honest, because I feel like they'll purposely take it out of context sometimes, and they'll try to use it against me. And I don't, and that's actually one of the reasons why I stopped. I used to go into to look at other religions, but I realized I'm doing the same thing to Muslims and to Hindus and those people when I try to interpret what it says in their books, because I honestly, and I don't want to do that because it's how I know how I feel when people try to do that about the Bible.
That drives me insane.
Time delays 11. So I was going to say that's also something that happens within the Christian community. I mean, I know that I've preached sermons, and I've been there when sermons have been preached where a snippet out of context will be taken. And one of the things that really used to bug me as a Christian was when people would take within the Christian community a part of the Bible and completely out of context to give it the meaning that they wanted for the sake of the story without actually understanding what it was about.
I mean, look at Tim O'Neill correcting people's history. I mean, he has a whole page called History for Atheists, and he actually dives into the actual history, or people that have been scholars correcting atheists. This is not how it's written. This is not an exegesis of this.
He loves Tim loves to criticize other people on their history, but the second you say, "Hey, you've got something wrong here," he doesn't like.
I would love you and Tim to go at it. That would be the exact.
Is he actually qualified? I mean, what's his? Who is he? Is he just someone who started a website, or because I've sort of said, well, hang on, there's a couple of things, and he went right on the attack and the.
I think he's very defensive because he's used to that. I think a lot of us get we get laid down.
With a thing that happened recently between Tim O'Neill and Seth Andrews about the history of for example, Christmas in relation to paganism, and Seth started calling him a Christian and stuff, and it's like, no, Tim was objectively correct in that. As a reconstructionist pagan.
Right? A knee-jerk reaction, a Pavlovian response, rather than listening to what Tim was saying in that conversation, right?
That's
yeah,
it.
I was going to say, as a historian, it frustrates. Just so everyone knows too, if it ever seems like we're talking over each other, it's just because being different parts of the world, we get this little bit of delay. So we'll both start talking before we realise the other person's talking. So if I do that, being on the other side of the world, I'll apologise straight up. So Sam, I'll throw to you, and then I'll say my bit.
So I was just going to say that I've then since had a lot of people tell me that because Seth Andrews said so, that I don't know the origins of my religion in relation to Christmas as well as he does, despite it drives me nuts.
I've had I guess what I was going to say is I've had a similar thing. I'm actually a historian. I'm going to be completing my PhD in history, or going to plan.
We have to call you
oh yeah, not
Dr.
yet.
Pastor, I love that.
We still have a few years there, but
That's a title.
But one of the things that frustrates me is it's where someone like an Aaron or a Matt or a Seth will throw something, and this is not a criticism of them because they're lay people interpreting history the way they are, but they'll put something out there, and I'll throw it. Well, actually, that's not quite right, and here's the history, and it's just no, you're wrong. I'm thinking, well, I've got academic qualifications, like, come on.
It still needs to be verified, right? I mean, people can still go, okay, look, this is what Atheist Pastor is saying. Let's go check it out, right? I mean, what's wrong with that? And
historians all disagree with each other anyway. All historians do is fight.
I'm glad to get an argument with you about history one day. I'm glad to get an argument with you one day about history.
That'd be fun.
You guys are referring to deification about this, about hero worship. You have people that I have experienced will literally shut people down by fiat and say that they're wrong and have no explanation as to why. They don't ever address any of the criticisms or the rejoinders. They just say that's not correct. And when you ask, okay, if I'm incorrect on this, all you have to do is demonstrate this. I mean, there's a lot of people in the atheist community that love to throw that word about demonstrate, right? Show me your evidence. They cling to empiricism as like the holy grail. And yet when you throw it back to them, they don't know how to respond because they've never read anything on these topics.
That actually leads to a question I have. So I work for a nonprofit organization, and the organization I work for, everybody gets paid well. And we kind of have this joke. we have this. What part of California do you live in?
I'm not too far from you, actually.
So long story short, we have this joke saying that if you work for a nonprofit and you're not getting paid, you're in a cult. I worked for a Catholic church and got paid well. I have it's kind of a weird question. I live in the state of California, so it might be a legality thing. But if somebody is working for a nonprofit and they're not getting paid, would you consider that cultish behavior?
No.
Or
I'll say no, because I just want to. I was the president of a nonprofit for education in my education, because I'm also a college professor. But I didn't get paid for that. But definitely not a cult.
That's super common. Like the British Heart Foundation, branches of it function as non-profit. I don't know if the whole thing is, but I've got a friend who went and worked there because they ended up dropping out of college, which is 16 to 18 education in the UK.
Well,
so they went and did basically an internship there and did voluntary work, and there was nothing culty about it. And I used to go and visit them at work and shit.
I spent years running chambers of commerce, and let me tell you, if that's a cult, that's the worst cult in the world.
And that's the reason. That's the reason why I asked. No, that's the reason why I asked, and because I live, it's not that I live in a sheltered world, but I'm surrounded by the people I'm surrounded by, and I love asking people other ideas and finding out how other people feel, because we say things in, I fall in my circle and we have our own language and things like that. And it was just something we kind of bat around. We always say, oh, you're in a cult, but it's more or less not deifying people.
We have a question for SJ from the chat that I think is legit. So, SJ, do you think that some atheists just rinse and repeat what the elite atheists argue?
Oh yes, I do. And I to back up even what Steve said, people sometimes show up on my timeline. I'll tweet something out, and then they'll just say that's been debunked, or that's wrong, or why do you keep tweeting this out when you're wrong? And I'm like, well, explain to me exactly how I'm wrong, and then I don't hear from them again. And so,
I think you should put out like a list of arguments you've already heard, and just post it one day.
I think
I've already heard all of these.
in the community where when you leave religion and you decide that I no longer have beliefs that I can't justify, and yet in reality we all have beliefs that we can't justify. They are just beliefs, and that is all there is. There are fundamental things that we all have to presuppose. There is no choice in that. Well,
including epistemological axioms, because
exactly.
Yeah,
because we can't prove.
Yeah, and a lot of atheists don't want to get that, right? Even though, like even Matt Dillahunty agrees. Yes, stop telling. He tells people all the time, stop saying you don't have beliefs. That's just silly. We all have epistemological beliefs. We all have axioms that are presupposed. We all have foundational beliefs. And a lot of people will balk at the term faith-based commitments, but that's what they are. They are faith-based commitments, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so when people say like, oh, I love the meme when people say, well, I don't believe in evolution, I accept it to be true. I'm thinking that's on the level of creationism. That statement is like, well, why is there monkeys if we're all evolved from monkeys? It's that level.
That's because that's what people hear other people say. And
right, exactly.
Yeah,
I think that's a fundamental misunderstanding of how science works, though. So,
but we're back to the new atheists. We're back to
because science,
so would you say that the newer atheists are the most vocal?
Well, when I say new atheists, I don't mean like how long they've been an atheist, although there tends to be a correlation, right? When I say new atheism trademark, which I didn't come up with, that is a subsect of atheism that, as you pointed out, are probably most of the time new, but doesn't by necessity mean that they have to be new. I mean, people have been in atheism for years that are being new atheists. It means that they have a certain type of mindset, like they argue by meme, right? They have a cult-like mindset. They refuse to correct anything that's been objectively shown that they're wrong about.
A criticism I would have of the atheist community more broadly, but still not everybody, is the tendency to dismiss claims that certain people are not good at something they're known for. So, like, I personally think The Hitch was not a great debater in terms of his points. Like rhetoric, yes. Points, no.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that.
But I get a lot of shit if I ever bring that up, and if my atheist friends ever bring that up, it's a bit like atheist card revoked sort of shit starts to happen.
No, I agree with you. I almost consider that the line of new atheism in a way, and in no way am I trying to gatekeep, but if you say you disagree with one of the big four, or even somebody on YouTube, all of a sudden it's a complete threat to that person, and they can't even present their evidence.
People have canceled me for disagreeing with one of the four. I mean,
can I maybe have somebody in the
it's just that's a 2010.
Can I just make a comment to the chat at the moment? Stuart, I like you having input. But I had said at the beginning, could we refrain from personally attacking people in the chat who are either in the chat or on the show? And you are constantly tearing on SJ, and yeah.
Yeah, I want to comment on something Stuart said. Now, Stuart is doing exactly what I said atheists do. He's saying that I've been debunked and all of this kind of stuff, but he doesn't specify anything. And he doesn't in my normal conversations where I see him commenting on my videos and that. But I also wanted to say with Stuart is, as far as that Planned Parenthood video that I posted, I did not realize that had been I didn't realize that wasn't factual, and so I pulled it down right when I found that out. Right when somebody said it wasn't factual, I pulled it down.
I'll give you an example. I've shown SJ when she had like a logical argument. I explained to her like it was an argument from affirming the consequent, and she took it on board. Now she tried to correct it. I don't know if she actually ever did, but at least she took it as okay, something's wrong here logically. Let me try to correct this. I mean, because again, it was objective. Would you agree, SJ, that I objectively showed you this is your argument? This is not logically valid.
Yeah, I had a mistake on one of these arguments. I'm sure. Yeah.
And I think what you said, you just
we all make mistakes.
Absolutely.
When you can say, you know what, I've made a mistake. I'll cop to it. and which credit to you, you've just done.
Yeah,
that's the height of intellectual honesty, right? That is an open-minded and epistemology is a virtue, right? Yeah, which virtue epistemology. And so when there's an objective matter to be had, and somebody fixes that, that's what we want in people. That we all should aspire to that. Now, subjectivity is a little bit different. Obviously, it's a lot more difficult to convince me subjectively that is the case, right? If I say, "Hey, vanilla is better than chocolate," and SJ says, "No, I like chocolate better," trying to convince her that vanilla is better. Especially vanilla bean, it's going to be very difficult, right?
Yeah.
There's 2 points I really quickly want to bring up, and I guess following on from the question that was asked before with the rinse and repeat answers. Once again, that's not something that's unique to the atheist community. Now, I'll use an example of something I had today where I've got someone who is trying to argue with me on Facebook about, I guess biblical history, and they're doing it via, image and meme and all that kind of stuff. And their response for me having walked away from Christianity and become an atheist was that obviously something had happened, or it's the usual ones that we always get. You hate God, something happened, you have a problem with religion. So it's not just, and look, that happens within Islamic communities, Hindu communities,
Absolutely.
Even the agnostics. I'm sorry, Steve. I'm sure the agnostics do the same thing. But
I left theism because I had a problem. With the church was doing.
So it is very much something that will happen in. And I guess I'm going to hammer this point home. And if it's the one thing I want to get, yes, atheism or the atheist community has its issues, but it's no different, no worse, no better than every other community.
Very much so.
That's why we try to look for the non-believers here. And I even think the theists would even probably agree that they want non-believers to be elevated. They're tired of the angry atheist kind of stuff because nobody wants to have those conversations any longer. And so us as the non-believers, we want the atheists to be better with their arguments, and I think theists do as well because they're tired of having the same ridiculous things just thrown at them. If I hear Eric the Penguin one more time, stop.
And that's the whole reason. That's the whole reason why I wanted to have this conversation. Was to start this conversation because I feel it's important that we see SJ, Steve, Atheist Pastor, Sam, Jen, and myself that we're actually having a conversation and not screaming the same old points. Because honestly, as an atheist, I'm tired of it too. I've gone back to watching old hockey on YouTube because I'm over half the arguments.
Like, well, why do you get along with SJ? You don't agree with the positions. I'm like, because we can have a conversation. I don't have to agree with her. She doesn't have to agree with me, but we can have a dialogue.
I live in the
I still have a lot of religious people in my family. My eldest daughter is still a fundamental Christian. She actually used she changed church, but she used to go to Living Waters. So it has a lot of respect for Ray Comfort.
Ray Comfort.
There is no way. I mean, I've taken her to church myself because when she's wanted to go and stuff. So,
and that's another reason why I wanted to have this conversation was because someone such as myself, I live in a mainly. Sorry, it's a bad. I learned it from you. Sorry, it's a bad habit. I live in. Yeah, exactly.
Just to be clear.
I live in a mainly Mormon neighborhood, and I have the nicest neighbors, nothing but respect for the people I live around. We all live in peace. We have our normal quarrels that any neighbors would have. But so
California Mormons are me. I've never had an issue with California Mormons. Utah.
I've been to Utah as well. It's a little bit different.
Yeah. But I left the Mormon church because again, I didn't like how they were influencing Prop 8. In 2008 election. And I was like, you should not be funding, this is not your domain here. And then they have the Evergreen Project and other things. And I was like, no, this is not my version of a God that's going to sit here and throw in these moral things. Oh yeah. You can't get married because you're gay or something. That's just to me as absurd.
And it's funny you say that. Go ahead, Sam.
To kind of piggyback a bit off this and a bit off something Chris said a minute ago. I do think that it's very few communities are completely deifying people, but every community does do it to the point where as a Christian, the pastor I was the pastor I had growing up was a little bit deified by some of the people in the church, to the point where a couple of people had to go, no, listen, he was wrong here, and here's why. And he agreed to it, and it eventually broke the idea of it. But also within the pagan community, I'll occasionally have to sit someone down and tell them, after every position I express that they think Ocean might not agree with, that it doesn't matter what Ocean thinks, you're your own fucking person.
I absolutely agree with you, and I
Ocean
can't
does
stress
get
that enough.
in the pagan community.
You know, I want to say something that kind of the elephant in the closet here. We have a really recent example of people deifying somebody. Look how people were following Trump around after he lost the election.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I mean, the worst part about Trump, though, is he deified himself. He was calling himself the new Messiah. I mean, that is that's disrespectful to everybody.
Do you know, being on the West Coast, I didn't realize how people had actually deified this man, because I don't see it around here. But when I see pictures of people in the South, it's genuinely scary.
He is a religious icon to them.
I don't understand that. He is the exact opposite of any tenet of faith.
He's the chosen one by God.
That's people in politics. I mean, how many people have got the Bernie, the same image of Bernie or AOC?
True.
It's politics.
Or even Camilla Harris. You know, I'm from California. You know, Camilla Harris isn't perfect.
I mean, look, Trump is more obvious with that because he plays into it. He loves it. It feeds his ego. And most politicians are. But it's because he has that large following. So it's something that's in, because by the same token, there's people who deify him and there's people who see him as the devil. So it goes both ways.
Yeah, but either way, that's the intention, right? He's worshipped in one regard and he's vilified in another, but both of them are people that are listening to him, and that's all he cares about.
And both of them, build up his ego. It's all an ego trip for Trump.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, you see, if you watch these people who follow him, I mean, they're just sitting there like awe-inspired. They'll drive around. It's almost like following the Grateful Dead from the '60s. You know,
so
crazy.
So, SJ, I have a question for you. Then, does Trump? Does he meet? I don't even know how to ask this question because you're going to say no. Is he on the level of a deity? Is he someone that you would deify in your religion? Is he someone that you would put on a platform?
No. See, the reason why, as a person, I think that Trump, I mean, I actually know people who personally know Trump, and I've got a lot of examples of, because I used to live down in South Florida, and so I'm very familiar with a lot of people Trump knows. And one of the reasons I didn't vote for him in the first election was because, and I made it really obvious, and this time I decided I'm not going to make it obvious who I vote for anymore, but I made it really obvious was because he was hitting on one of my friend's girlfriends. Trump was hitting on her a long time ago and really insulted my friend and said, "Why are you with this guy? He's so ugly." And, in front of this girlfriend that he was trying to impress. So I didn't think that was a...
Who hasn't been hit on by Trump?
I would say inanimate objects have been hit on by Trump.
Yeah, exactly.
It just boggles my mind how Christians have deified this man, and I don't want to just lump Christians into it, but I live in America, so.
Well, look at Pastor Greg Locke.
You're aware there are two other people on this panel that also live in your country. One of them lives in your state, babe.
No, I know.
Look,
I'm used to being the
token. Not be a bit of a Poe. How could he? He actually even said, even after Trump lost the election and even left office, he's still going on. Oh no, Trump's still president.
I'm not talking about Locke.
We actually did
I do.
We actually did it.
I don't buy it. I think he knows he's full of crap.
He has to be. You'd
have to know.
We actually did a stream literally earlier today about Greg Locke, and the conclusion we came to is that we think he's probably a grifter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no,
I heard that this morning.
I probably, yeah.
But back on to someone like
Greg I would Locke, have to say, and I don't know whether you agree with it. Greg Locke is one of those people who probably the normal, the average Christian community isn't happy that he represents, that he says he represents my question.
Hey, Greg Locke does more. He does more for the atheist community than the atheists.
That goes into tribalism, right? That goes into what Atheist Pastor was saying earlier. I don't see enough theists pointing out these issues with things like prosperity gospel and great comforts of the world and people like Greg Locke. I don't see a lot of that. And at the same token, I don't see a lot of atheists pointing out the atheist leaders' issues. Now,
I agree with you. And that's why I keep on asking SJ dumb questions, because from a Christian standpoint.
Yeah,
I'll on that kind of point, Steve, raise my hand and say I'd like to think that pagan communities are like that, and by and large we try and make them that way, but we do have our problem people too.
Well, as Atheist Pastor pointed out, every group does, right?
Very much so. Very much so.
One thing I've noticed, and this is a trend, and once again, something I think happens in a lot of communities, is people will try and argue on things that they've seen other people argue on as if they're experts on it. There's things that I know, which is history, the Bible, things like religion. There's things that I don't know, which is philosophy and science. They're the two big things. Now, I found myself in a conversation the other day where someone would have a philosophical argument with me. I'm like, hey, no, this is not my area. I have my opinion. I am not equipped to debate it. But most people won't do that. Most people will, and with all due respect to you, Steve, a lot of people who follow your stuff will try and repeat what you say, but without, and I've heard what you say. I agree with your stance on what atheism is. But I'm not going to try and argue that because I don't know enough. If someone hits me with a counterpoint, I've got nothing. Same with science. If I run into a young Earth creationist, obviously I believe that in long old Earth and evolution, Big Bang, all that kind of stuff, and a lot of that. I guess I do have some grounding of that from anthropology, but I am not a scientist. So if I could put one thing out there to the atheist community and every other community, stop arguing on the things that you don't know about.
Yeah, well, a lot of people think that
exactly.
Even if you're not an expert, don't argue with experts.
A layper, not an expert, but layper.
If someone's got a rough idea or there's something they've studied, it's something they've got some knowledge on, that's okay, but don't just say, Matt he said this, or Aaron. The people who argue from Aaron Ra's point of view on history. Now, even Aaron said history is not his strong suit, and to always double check him. So this is absolutely not an attack on Aaron. But I've had people who want to argue points, and the Christmas one was a great example. People who want to argue on the origins of Christmas, and I'm just like, well, hang on a second, no. That's not the case. So, this is, and you'll go to try and explain, and it's just like, fingers in the air, no, Aaron or Matt said this. It's like, well,
see, I think I think there's potentially a point worth being made in regards to how you mentioned debating with the young Earth creationists can be an issue. Like, I've noticed a lot of people will try and debate them, but because they are young Earth creationists and that's their big talking point, they will know more about that and more about their arguments than most lay atheists will, unless they're severely autodidactic or have done a lot of actual academic study in it. And as such, I think people should do things like if they bring up evolution as an argument, point them to our Ra's series about evolution and why young Earth creationism is an issue with evolution. Do that, but don't try and argue with them on it, because you will probably lose, even though you're right.
Yeah, here's the thing. I'm obviously flattered when people cite me, and I hate to use that word, but I don't know what else. But like the Van Noel diagram that me and Landon came up with. He basically helped with the legend and working out some of the bugs of it, and. When I see people throwing that around a lot, and I see people, throwing out, some of my other arguments, and that's fine. But most of them that do tend to actually understand them, and I think to the atheist pastor's point, I'd rather have somebody say, "Look, I don't know enough about this. Here's Steve's argument, and you can evaluate it." Or, "Hey, here's Steve's arguments, and I agree with him, and let me explain to you why." I think like Answers and Reasons, brilliant at that, right? Those guys over there really know these topics, and so we're very parallel in our way of thinking, and so a lot of people even thought that they're me. It's like, no, that's completely different people. But when
sorry,
when people cite like Aaron Ra, when people cite Aaron Ra, it's fine to say, look, I don't know anything about. I do, but if I don't say I don't know anything about biology, right? I can say, look, I'm not equipped to really get into this discussion with you. Here are some Aaron's arguments, and maybe you can find somebody to discuss them with. We should all be able to recognize where our limitations are. There are topics that I won't go near. I'm like, I don't know all about this. I have no idea about this particular topic. I'm not interested in it, or I don't know anything, I'm not even read on it, I'm not going to say, look, I'm going to engage you on this on topics I don't feel comfortable with. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think a lot of the angry atheists, they want to jump on anything. They want to, any topic. They're like, I'm going to quote somebody. I'm like, okay, well, they're wrong about this. Let me show you all the citations I have for this. And then they ghost you or they block you every single time.
That's often a reaction to being shown that you're wrong.
Yeah.
People don't like being shown that they're wrong. But I have a question for you, Steve and SJ. Does it frustrate you when you hear an atheist say something like, well, I don't have any faith?
Yeah, because I think they're misunderstanding that word.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, this other thing is like someone like Aaron Ra, just speaking of faith, he always says that Christians have faith without any sort of evidence, and that drives me batty. It says very specifically in the Bible that we're supposed to keep looking into evidence, to test evidence, to do all that kind of stuff. And so when he goes around and he keeps repeating, even though he's been corrected, that yes, we actually do look for evidence, we have an evidential case, and he just keeps using the same thing. And IP pointed that out in their debate.
I have a question from a friend of the channel, Jenny Morgan. She's asked, do you need a college degree to be an atheist? It was kind of facetious, but it's I think it's a question that definitely needs to be answered, because there are people who will say, I don't have a belief, and they walk away and they go on with their life and they live their life in peace. But I think we are more or less talking about the people who argue in our circles and come online and try to prove and disprove people.
Yeah, I think to speak to the point that you guys were doing earlier today, is this idea with the new atheists and the anti-theist. I actually think the new ones are more like, a lot of times they come in as anti-theists, more than just an atheist. Because a lot of the people in real life who are atheists, I think they're they're just not at all the same kind of personality as far as I've met. So
yeah, and I think there's an important distinction to me. There are people out there that have some weird reason have their own stipulative type usage of the term anti-theism, which is bizarre, and that nothing in the literature even remotely corresponds to how they're using these terms. But there's important things to be had about anti-theism. There's actually arguments for anti-theism. There's what's called the axiology of theism that involves anti-theism, and why certain people like Nagel has actually said, if correct me if I'm wrong, but he actually said something to the effect, I don't want God to exist, right? There's no value of having a God that exists. So we're talking about what happens if there is a God. And anti-theists say, look, there's no virtue to having a God. Matter of fact, if there is an actual God, this is bad. This is a bad thing. We don't want bad things to happen. I'm against the concept of God. I'm against the concept of religion. And anybody who sits there and says, well, anti-theism is merely the belief that God does not exist, has no idea what they're talking about. They can be ignored by fiat. I'm telling you right here and now, they have no idea what they're talking about. Because there's an argument to be had why people say, look, I think religion is bad. I think that we should try to convince people that religion is bad, that religion is harmful, there are no gods. And I don't understand why people want to water down these terms to where they're just meaningless, because if people want change, if people want secularism, if people want, hey, I don't want religion in schools, I think religion is harmful, why would you not try to convince people that gods aren't real, and that God, even the concept of God is harmful? That is what anti-theism is. And I agree that a lot more people are anti-theism.
Because it's easy to spout, PowerPoint. It's another thing to actually, live what you're saying. Sure, so anybody can, in my own life, in my business, that's my business model. Show me. Don't say you're going to do something, like actually do it, and then I'll believe you.
Yeah, and I think with
these terms, I think it's counterproductive to the entire philosophical community when you're sitting there saying, oh, well, I'm going to use this word in some stipulative way, which the atheist community of Austin does, and Randolph Richardson does, and all these people that make stuff up. And then when you say, okay, well, I want to learn about this topic properly, I'm going to go read this paper over here. This peer review paper. If you try to use their terminology, you're going to be confused.
Absolutely. And if anyone needs a degree, hold on.
I think Sam's been trying to say something about that.
Go ahead, Sam. Go ahead.
I think that the big distinction here is one that, Steve, one of my few criticisms of the things I've seen of you would be that you always look at academic terminology and over lay people terminology. And I think that it's two separate conversations, and that when people try and merge them, that's an issue. But that a lot of people will have a normal conversation, so to speak, with layman's terms.
That's why you should always define terms before a conversation.
Absolutely.
And so this is the big thing, that people don't define their terms. So, for example, when people say they're an anti-theist, if I ask them to define theism, I'm not a theist. As a polytheist,
which makes no sense, right? Well,
and so it's like.
But I agree. I agree. They want to have these discussions in their own microcosm, in their own little groups, right? They can do whatever the heck they want. They can make up any terms they want. They can say, hey, look, if you don't believe the exact God that I believe in, you're an atheist. They can do that if they want. I mean, whatever. That's actually, a form of classical theism. Classical theists would say, look, if you're a deist or you're a pagan, you're not a theist. That's how they would look in that schema, which is perfectly fine for that schema. And so I agree with you. They can have those types of lay types of things, but the problem is they try to say they're normative. They try to say that these are the normal things that are used in academia, and they say that when I say a statement like, "Oh, in academia, these how these terms are understood," that is an objective statement. That's when they say that I'm wrong. That's where the argument is.
Well, in that point, they have to define their terms and not try to use their terms in the context you were using it, because it doesn't work.
Oh yeah, if you qualify it with in academia, then yeah, absolutely. I've just not always heard you qualify it with that, and so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I normally do, but I've had so many discussions. But if you go to my I have I literally have a webpage on my positions to avoid what's called straw man abatement. And one of the things I say is I tend to use these philosophical terms and academic terms. However, I understand colloquial usage. But when they say, "Look, Steve, this word means this intrinsically. There's no other things for it. You're just wrong." Where do you go from there? I'm not going to have those discussions because now they're just arguing.
Failure to understand how language works.
Language prescripticism.
I have an interesting point to bring up actually about Steve, because what will happen is Steve has got some people who do see him as the devil. So he's like that. Anything Steve says is wrong. Here's something that's interesting. There's already people who are going to go on a stream next week to refute what's been said today before they know it's been said.
Yes. So wait a minute. Would that be? They don't deify me. They anti-deify me, I guess.
Wait, I want to ask you guys, because Steve gets in these arguments all the time. It's on. Do you believe that atheism is a lack of belief, or do you have a lack of belief? Are there any lack of belief atheists here? Are you on the belief that there is no God?
What's funny is I actively believe there is no God.
I think most atheists that are self-defined as just mere lack of belief atheists. I think the most of the times when I have an actual conversation with them, with an honest one, they tend to actually eventually say that I think all gods are BS and gods don't exist. I think if you have an honest interlocutor, that's where eventually leads to with most atheists I've talked to that are intellectually honest. The ones that aren't, you can't get anywhere with.
Yeah, I was about to say I don't believe in God. But I've had my brain shut off, and it was one of those things where when in our heads we have all these spectacular things going on, we can see beyond ourselves. But from my belief, when our brain shuts off, we're done. Because when my brain was shut off, it went from one moment to another, and it seemed like 10 seconds, and it was over 3 hours, 4 hours. But that's my belief. That's my belief.
When people try and define atheism to mean agnosticism, I have a personal irritation with that, purely and simply because agnostic theists are a thing. And so even if someone acknowledges that their evidence only gets them to true agnosticism, they will then believe atheism.
Yeah, I used to have a description in my Twitter title that said, "I am basically agnostic, but if you present me with a god without good evidence, I will be atheistic towards that god," which I think is more or less. Which is more or less Steve's position, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but here's the thing: it's almost those are and no disrespect, I love you, but it's kind of throwaway statements. People say, "Well, if there's not enough evidence, I'll change my mind." That's kind of most people are like that, right? That's kind of one of the very few people, now they do exist, but very few people say, "Look, there's no amount of evidence that's going to change my mind on this." Now, there are some people like that. There's some radical evangelicals.
I've met a few.
Yeah, so they do exist. We're talking for the most part, the general people. Hey, but there's enough evidence. But you have a very specific dichotomy going on here of a difference between somebody like Atheist Pastor, who legit says, look, all gods are nonsense, right? They're just no gods. And then somebody like myself who says, well, I don't state that. I don't have the belief that there are no gods. And so it makes no sense to lump us in the same category, right? I mean, why would we have very fundamental differences of position here, which is fine. But why try to subsume agnostics into atheism? That seems, again, counterproductive, because
I think it's a term thing. It's because they use here's the reality of it. The term atheist has become the word, has basically taken over the word secular. And the reason is because there's a lot of organizations that have atheist in the title. Now, they want to make themselves as open to as many people. So say American Atheists as an example. They say it's a lack of belief. Yeah. Now, if they just say that, well, if American Atheists were to come out and say, well, no, you're only an atheist if you actively disbelieve in a God, well, all of a sudden, 90% of their membership's going to go. I mean, if they were the American Secular Society, it's a different story. It's the definition has changed. And look, my attitude is, if people want to call themselves an atheist, and as far as I'm concerned, they're an agnostic, I'll call them an atheist. I don't care. It's people can call themselves whatever they want to call themselves. I might have a different opinion of what they are, but so be it.
Yeah,
sorry.
What were you going to say?
Go on, sorry, yesterday.
I was just going to say, is it really American Secular Society? Because look at the acronym there.
Well, yeah. But I don't think a lot of people only because they've been ingrained to think that that's what the term is. But again, I don't even care about the labels. It's the problem is forget the labels, forget the nomenclature. Let's talk about the positions. And Absolutely. It's very frustrating to have an atheist who is intellectually dishonest that will not be forthright with their actual positions.
Yeah,
it drives me insane when you're asking simple questions to try to have a simple dialectic, and they sit there and are evasive, just like a creationist would be evasive.
That's one of the reasons
it's not like you're trying to have a game of gotcha.
No, I completely agree with you, and that's one of the reasons that I've kind of turned away from some atheist content that I used to watch, because it's become exactly what you said. It's just same old argument, and it's a giant hug box.
And everybody has a slightly different philosophical position. Even within the Christian community, Christians have different they have the same core beliefs, but their surrounding beliefs around that can be different. And it's exactly the same for pagans, and it's the same for people in the atheist community. The core beliefs might be the same, but the things that go around that, the stuff that you have to attribute to faith will be different.
Core beliefs aren't even necessarily the same, because I have heard Christians say that monotheism is a matter of salvation. And I know Christians who are monolatrists, which means they believe multiple gods exist and they worship one.
Can I explain that a little bit? About how from that perspective. Okay, so here's the deal. If most Christians, and whether you're a Lutheran or you're a Methodist or whatever you are, or Baptist, I'm a Baptist, identify with Baptist Church right now. But whatever you are, we're supposed to have the core belief that Jesus resurrected. That's it. And all the other stuff is tangential, like whether or not the earth was made in 4.5 billion years ago, or if the earth is a young earth. That kind of stuff to me is on the side. But there's Psalm 82 is really interesting, because Michael Heiser's been coming out with some stuff where he looked at Psalm 82 and he realized, who is he referring to? This divine council of the gods, the sons of God. And so he did a lot of work on that and came to the realization that it helped to explain a lot of the presence of these other sort of gods on the planet that have been guiding other religions. And so I would recommend Unseen Realm if you want to read up.
You accept that? You like what's called henotheism?
Monolatrists?
No, it's the idea that only one's worthy of worship, the supreme.
Okay, so monolatrists, like for example, would say that look, there are these other beings. There's actual beings out there that are called God, but there's only one supreme.
Right.
Or only one is worshipped.
So in a sense, there's almost an aspect of Christianity. The Bible almost states that there's a pantheon. In that sense.
It does. Well, I think it does.
Genesis here's where the theological fund's going to come in. The fallen angels, I think that refers to. So the sons of God who fell in Genesis 6. I think that's what you'll find, because they taught all these different things to people. And that's the reason for the flood. So that's something that would have continued. And I think from a theological standpoint, that's where I'd go.
I would take issue with that on the grounds that it is a different word than is used elsewhere to mean angel. It is its own separate word when you look at the original.
Yeah. He's Michael Heiser on his stuff. He talks a lot, and it's a Nephilim. I think that's part of
The
it.
Nephilim were the offspring, weren't they?
Right.
Angels.
So I know we could talk all night, but I know.
This is a rabbit hole.
Yeah, we're rabbit holing. And SJ and Chris both have to get going.
Absolutely. So it was very nice meeting all of you. Thank you for coming on the WTF stream. Well, Sam, I know who you are. You're awesome.
And you've been on almost every show, haven't you, Sam?
Possibly.
I think you actually have been on every show we've had so far. He's become regular.
Sorry,
They've become regular. I am terribly sorry, Sam.
Really quickly. Sam, is that whiskey you're drinking? And if so, what kind of whiskey?
Yes. It is an Oban single malt.
Okay. Good taste as well. Good taste in t-shirt. Good taste in drink. Okay.
This was an 18th birthday present from my dad. So.
I didn't. We didn't get to my list. Maybe we do that in part 2, or do it later on my channel. If somebody wants.
I would love to do that. Go through your list on your channel some point, Steve.
So
that'd be cool. Yeah.
Absolutely, we'll do it. Absolutely.
Yes, I know we didn't get to your list because the show ended up being a bit shorter than what we intended, but I do know that SJ and Chris both have to get going, so
yeah.
I think we were starting to go down rabbit hole, so now's a good time probably to wind up and follow through the other part on your channel at some point, Steve. And
that'd be fun. It's great.
And I don't know for sure that we'll be following through with the second part to this next week. It depends on the people who asked for it said they would actually watch this first and decide if they needed to follow up. So if they're happy with what's been said, there may not be, but we do have another topic for next week.
One of those people thinks that Steve's the devil. Another one thinks that I'm the devil. So I'm sure they disagree with everything.
Yeah, Steve has an amazing cult-like following.
That's I do that all the time.
I'm heavy metal, man.
Exactly.
Ronnie James Dio.
I actually saw Dio at the Long Beach Arena.
Oh, don't tell me
with Iron Maiden and
my childhood ended the day he died. It was just done.
Yeah, it was sad times.
Yeah.
Oh, we're talking about metal. It's time to end the stream.
Okay, it's time to end the stream. I want to say a huge thank you to all our guests. SJ, thank you so much. It's been awesome having you on.
Thank you.
And it's been lovely to meet you face to face, not on Twitter, because Twitter's a cesspool.
I agree. I've been trying to pull away from it really hard.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
It is. It's crazy.
It is.
Steve, always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Chris, you've got a show tonight.
I do. With you.
Yeah, if I can make it. I may not. It depends, because I might be picking my brother up from hospital.
That's okay. Yeah, 9:30 Australian Eastern Daylight Time, which is 5:30 in the morning for those of you in the US. It's
we'll be slamming Tim Tams.
No, because what happened was it was going to be a celebration of Things Australia, but Ed and Jay haven't got their special Australia pack.
That's a shame, because Amanda got hers.
I know she got hers, but I can't teach them how to eat Vegemite if they don't have the Vegemite put on the
we're going to
toast.
put that one off to next week after Australia Day, are we?
So I might actually bring up a few of the historical. I've had some historical memes thrown at me, so we might play around with a few of those today.
Okay.
Sorry.
Chris, what's your channel's? What's the name of it?
It's in the link.
Atheist Pastor.
It's in the description, SJ.
Oh, okay.
So youtube.com/Atheist Pastor.
We'd love to have you on sometime, SJ. It'd be
yeah,
it's more laid back.
Yeah.
And,
Absolutely.
Yeah. That'd be awesome. And Sam, great to have you again.
Yeah.
Have you got something coming up, by the way, Sam? Because I forgot to ask people that, so I'll come back to you, SJ and Steve in a sec.
I have a video coming out in a couple of weeks, but I'd have to explain the concept behind the video because I don't have a working title yet, so I'm not going to do that. Spoilers.
We can do that on another stream. You're often on my streams, so
yeah.
SJ, have you got something coming up? Your
I do.
everyone's links
Tomorrow
is in the description. Please go and sub and follow these people. I'm sure most people
Thank
are
you.
at least hate following SJ. So.
Yeah. Well, I have tomorrow. I'm gonna at noon. I'm gonna go on my channel and talk about the pro-choice versus pro-life arguments for abortion. So
that'll be interesting. I would love to have that discussion with you because I think people have there's a lot of people who have very polarized views who, if you actually sit and discuss it properly, are a lot closer in their thinking than what they probably admit.
that's true.
So
Yeah. As someone who sat on, or who has had a lot of conversations on that, it's an interesting topic. It's definitely it's one that needs to be discussed a lot more respectfully between both sides.
Absolutely.
Please.
Absolutely.
And Steve, you've always got something coming up. What's
I have
this week?
the next thing. I haven't really have any planned. I haven't been really up to par and feeling that great. There's been a lot going on. People know that there was obviously a tragedy in our community, and we're all feeling the effects of that. And it's just been seasonal stuff. So I haven't really been streaming as much as I ought to, and I apologize for that. The next thing that I actually have planned is on Caffeine Corner on Monday, which I think we're moving to 2 p.m. Pacific time. And Chester wasn't feeling too well either. So, and I think we have Egghead on, if I'm not mistaken, from Drunken Peasants. However, I'll probably do something this weekend. I might even do something Friday. If anybody has any suggestions, or if anybody wants to talk
you've already
about
got one
just...
idea. You've got the list that we didn't get to.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to have Douglas and Sam and you on, but it's about your guys' availability. So, if you guys want to do this as soon as like Friday or this weekend, I'm down for it. But it's again,
I'll be around. I've got to be around here for my brother when he gets to the hospital. So.
Well, this time zone actually, we're like we said 3:30 for this. This is perfect for me if all you're available like on Saturday or Friday.
Just dragging my butt out of bed nice and early. That's all it means. I got Will to wake me up. He phoned me this morning to make sure I got out of bed.
Do you guys want to have that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm happy to have that discussion. Yeah.
What?
Work out the time zone conversion, but yeah, I'm good.
Well, it's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3:30.
Same
we're
time.
all here,
Yeah,
so
that's fine.
my time. So same time when? Friday or Saturday?
Either works. I don't think I've got anything on either morning. So
either should work for me.
Okay. How about tomorrow then? I'm down.
All right.
I have nothing for tomorrow.
Yep.
All right, we'll do that.
Sure. I might have someone sat over there mouthing things to me occasionally because I'm going to have a friend over, but they'll be on a stream as well, so we'll just be mouthing across the room at each other.
That works.
All right, let's go over let's go after the new atheist kind of trait list that I came up with, because Seth Andrews was kind of balking at it a little bit, but he never rebutted it. He that's what's funny is these kind of conversation died after I'm like, well, these are subjective. He's like, well, those are subjective.
No, Steve, you're wrong. You're wrong, Steve. You're wrong.
You're objectively wrong.
You're just wrong. I don't have any evidence to back that up, but you're wrong.
And now I'm blocking you.
By way of solar intuition, you are wrong. Clearly.
I wish I was in control of the StreamYards here, because I would have dumped you out for a second, Steve.
I do
control of that bit, and he didn't think of it.
No, I'm not angry. I'm the happy
Not
atheist.
angry.
The name's probably taken already. I'm smiling atheist. Is that taken already as well?
This has been an amazing stream. I think it has shown a lot of people that people from different diversified areas, both Christian, pagan, atheist, and agnostic, we can all get together. We can have valuable discussions, and they can be polite without being dumpster fires. And I think that's an important thing for people to see in the community, that just because you disagree with somebody doesn't mean that you can't also have things that can bring you together. And I think that's a worthwhile thing to know within the community.
Quarantine hug.
Big hugs. So thank you to all of you again. This has been so much fun. Thank you to everybody in the chat, barring a couple of people who dumped in there with comments about Steve and about SJ, and I think there was one about me as well, but I missed it. Most of you have been absolutely brilliant. I thank you all for being polite and kind and not turning the chat into a dumpster fire, because I was really worried about that. Please go at least follow everybody who's been on this. The links are down below in the description. Try and get some alternative perspectives if you haven't, and don't necessarily and I can't even speak. Don't necessarily even just jump on people to attack. Listen to what they have to say first, and then make sure that instead of attacking, if you've got a differing opinion, back your opinions up, because that's kind of important. And don't deify others. It's all right to have heroes, but don't think they're faultless.
Except for Steve, he's always right.
Ozzy is God.
I just figured out who else Atheist Pastor looks like. He looks like David Wood. That's who I was trying to think.
Who's David Wood, and is that good or is that bad?
I'll let
you gotta Google.
You'll have to look it up now, Chris. All right.
I mean, it's not wrong.
Did anybody want to add anything before we end up?
Thanks to the 4 people who disliked, because it's still interaction in the algorithm, still boosts the video.
It does. Thank you to all you hate mongers. Send your friends in to hate this video more so the algorithm lifts it.
Classic.
Come in that comment section. We'll have fun with you. All right. Thank you all very much again, and I look forward to continuing this discussion tomorrow on Steve's channel. Watch us out on Twitter, and follow Steve if you want to see that, because that should be a lot of fun as well. And once again, we'll show you how this can be done nicely. All right.
Thank you.
Love you all. There should be a Stump Gen on tomorrow evening, my time, which will be morning time in the US. Midday UK. I'm sure Sam will probably join me if they're not asleep.
We'll see.
If you're awake, Steve, I'll send you a link as well. You can have some fun with the chat if you're feeling up to it. But aside from that, next week we'll either do a follow-on from this week's show, or we do have another topic in store. So just keep an eye on my Twitter and Will's Twitter, and we'll let you know what's coming up. But there'll definitely be another WTF show next week. And bye, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
See you all. Thank you.